Hi, I'm Grace Dawes. I'm the editor of Movement, and we're here at Move America 2024 today. I'm joined by Jennifer Brace, Chief Futurist from Ford Motor Company. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jennifer. How's your Move experience been so far?
So far, so good. It really just got kicked off this morning, and we're still in the morning. So I haven't seen a lot yet, but I can tell there is a lot to see.
Definitely. And you recently just had your keynote panel this morning. It was titled About the Future of Mobility Trends. And you were joined by Mercedes, Volvo, the United States Department of Transport, and a few others. And I just wanted to ask you what your main takeaways are from that talk. What did you learn and what did you say as well?
Sure. So the short story is, in some ways, I would say the future of transportation is complicated. We are continuing to unfold in that future as we speak. So we got to talk about electric vehicles, we talked about infrastructure, we talked about autonomous vehicles, we talked about what, kind of regulations, and we talked about high-speed rail.
Yeah.
So we were all over the map in the best way, because I do think a lot of the future is about choice, and how do we give people a choice to get from point A to point B in the most efficient way, and how can we, in a lot of ways, one of our goals is to give them some time back in their day. How do we make it easier so that it is not a stressful experience, but one that feels like they're actually enjoying it?
Yeah, definitely. High-speed rail was actually the one that I did not expect to come up, but actually makes sense to come up. Have you encountered much of high-speed rail in your role? And also, I also wanted to ask you, as your role title is Chief Futurist, can you just tell me a bit more about that and how you define your role, and what does being a futurist entail in a major automotive company?
Sure. Yeah, so as a Chief Futurist, I get asked about my role a lot in terms of people not having heard of something like that before, not knowing what it means. So that's normal. At the end of the day, what I do is I spend a lot of time looking at trends, looking at signals, looking at uncertainties that give me some ideas as to how the future might look different than today. I never say with certainty that I predict the future in 5 or 10 years is going to look just like this, because the truth is nobody can predict the future to a T. So what I do instead is I often am considering multiple versions of the future. And internally at the company, what I do is I work with teams to help them consider how those futures might look different than today, and then question whether or not their strategies are robust or resilient in these different futures. And if the answer is no, they're not resilient, how do we make them better? How do we consider these different futures, or how do we consider the different signals we're seeing, and use those to our advantage, basically, so that we can be better prepared for the future, so that we're not so hyper-focused that we're in trouble when something changes.
Yeah, definitely. And I also wanted to ask you, in your role, you must, obviously, as we've just said, you can't predict the future, but you have to think ahead. And what is the most surprising or unexpected trend that you believe will shape the future of the mobility industry, or will be involved in the future?
Yeah. So within my role, a lot of what I look at is actually well outside of automotive. So I'm spending a lot of time looking at what I call the STEEP factors, which stands for social, technological, economic, environmental, and political. You'll notice automotive was not one of those, and that's by design, because I'm paying attention to all the things in the external environment that might impact the world or the environment that we are operating within in the future. So thinking along those lines, right now, I think one of the most kind of important things that we aren't necessarily talking about as much as we could is what we see from a climate and an extreme weather perspective.
Yes.
And how that is changing the environment around us, how it's going to impact supply chain, how it impacts whether or not people can get insurance, how it impacts where they are going to live, and how they're going to need to move, and when they're going to need to move, potentially even at a very short moment's notice. So I think that's one of the biggest things that is going to be impacting the industry in the next 5 to 10 years, that we need to really kind of think through. How do we make a more robust system that's going to be resilient within this world that has increasing amounts of climate change, and really climate disasters, if you will?
Yeah. Well, just noting off something you just said, climate, as you know, impacts every sector of the mobility ecosystem. And you mentioned insurance, which I never really thought about. I never thought about how major disasters and insurance encounter each other. What other parts of the mobility ecosystem can these things impact that you wouldn't firsthand really expect? Because when I hear it, I think about battery mining, all that kind of stuff. But
absolutely.
what is it also that's surprising it does interact with.
Yeah, so you're right, absolutely. It's going to be, can we get the materials that we want and that we need? Are they in places that we can still get to? Or are those places potentially, if we're building plants, for example, close to shorelines, are they going to be hit by a hurricane? Are they going to be hit by flooding? Are they going to be in a severe drought situation that's a problem? All of those are questions. If we're building a plant in the South, for example, what type of heat implications might that have for the workers that are there? Those are big questions. I think from a consumer perspective, they're living in all of these zones, right? So what happens if the vehicle is in a space that recently got flooded or might get flooded? Like, how are there other things that we can do to help them either get out of that zone or to make it safer for them to get through it? So I think that we will continue to see kind of disruptions in those spaces. And then supply chain is a really easy one. You know, how might that disrupt? But even I think the part that people often forget is often that consumer perception.
Yeah.
So it's number one, it can be really disruptive to their life in a moment, right? If they are hit with some type of extreme weather event that's going to be impactful in that moment. But I think it also has some longer lasting impacts on what they choose to do next time they need to move, or what makes them feel safe moving forward from a mobility perspective. What system are they going to trust? And then how can we help to make sure that we are building that trusted system for them moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's lots to consider, and I look forward to seeing how it pans out and how we can, collaborate together to make mobility safer and more sustainable and better.
That's right.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me today to chat about that, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here at Move America.
Thank you.